Final story tonight, and that is Professor Wolff's interview here with Marianne Williamson. Now, there are some things that they say in this interview that I think is important for people to hear. And I know some of you may have your opinions about Marianne Williamson. I mean, I don't agree with Marianne Williamson on everything either. But I want you to listen to what they talk about in this discussion, because they're going to talk about democracy, but they're going to explain why someone who may have voted for Obama turned around and voted for Donald Trump. They're going to explain why people are walking away from voting in general. And they're going to explain why people have just lost faith in the electoral system in this country. And I think this is important. So let's go ahead and get into this.
I'm proud and pleased and honored that we have with us today, for our microphones and our cameras, Marianne Williamson. You probably don't need an introduction, but I'm going to give one briefly anyway. She's an author, she's a political activist, she's a spiritual thought leader. She's also a best-selling author, 14 books under her belt, 4 of which have been #1 New York Times bestsellers. Some years ago, she funded Project Angel Food, a nonprofit that has delivered more than 14 million meals to ill and dying homebound patients, including victims of HIV/AIDS, since 1989. In 2004, she founded the Peace Alliance, she co-founded the Peace Alliance, and in 2020, many of you got to know her as she ran for the Democratic nomination for president, and eventually withdrew in favor of Bernie Sanders, if I have my historical record correct. So first of all, thank you very, very much for joining us, Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. It's an honor to be with you.
All right, I want to get right into the political situation and how you see it, how you understand it right now. So many people have described the last several years, already before Trump, certainly during Trump, and since, as a movement to the right of the United States, politically speaking, maybe culminating in a whole host of events that I could pick out. The one that's in everyone's mind these days is the Supreme Court's bevy of decisions overturning Roe versus Wade, getting rid, or it seems, the separation of church and state, and so on. So let me ask, how do you see it? Is there such a shift? And if so, how do you account for it?
I don't see the proper description as left versus right. I see the proper description as neoliberal, corporatism, anti-democracy versus democracy and the well-being of our people. People who are the working people of the United States, the average citizen of the United States, is being screwed by the same forces, whether they are on the right or on the left. I am currently reading a biography of Franklin Roosevelt. And Roosevelt...
I just want to chime in here. You notice what she just said there? It's not a left-right issue. All of us are being screwed over. All of us are being exploited by the 1%. Being a Democrat or being a Republican has absolutely nothing to do with that. That's a class issue.
Said that we didn't have to worry, he said, about either fascist or communist takeover as long as democracy took care of our people. That is what has happened over the last 40 years, and 40 plus years, actually, with this advent of this extraordinary neoliberal, amoral, corporatist stance, which actually has replaced democracy as our governing principle, causing this massive transfer of wealth and opportunity and resources and power into the hands of a relatively tiny group of Americans. You've created huge swaths of desperate people. Desperate people do desperate things. Desperate people are a national security risk to any country. And so people look around for...
And this is where the poverty and the crime portion is linked. If you are in a situation where you are desperate, if you're poor and you need food, for example, how are you going to eat if you can't pay for it? You might steal food. I remember when I lived in New York, I saw a kid, and I think, this to this day still breaks my heart. I saw a kid stealing food. And I don't mean like grabbing a soda and like candy or something. I mean like actual food. And that said something to me. They don't have enough money, his family, to have enough money for food. So desperate people do desperate things. If you need to eat and you don't have the money, what are you going to do? You're probably going to steal the food. And what Marianne is saying here is that now this number has increased. You see, it used to be about the working class. It's not anymore. Politically, it's not. The Democratic Party left the working class a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the last time we had elections in this country that weren't bought. And that goes back to an interview that Ralph Nader had when he said, like, back then, he was able to fight against General Motors because there were no such thing as political action committees. There were no PACs. There were no super PACs. They didn't have it. Didn't exist. It's all bought and paid for now. So now you have increased homelessness. You have increase in poverty. So of course, when they talk to you about the crime rate increasing in this country, you got to connect it back to the poverty situation. We have given control to few people. The people at the top have so much control that 1%, and they just exploit us. That's what's happening. That's where we're at. Didn't just happen yesterday. It's been happening for a long time, but now it's even worse. So let's go back in.
What they can find. And in 2016, we had an authoritarian populist on the right, Donald Trump. We had a progressive populist on the left, Bernie Sanders. And because the DNC, which is in the hands of the corporatist element of the Democratic Party, suppressed Bernie, the American people were not going to go with a woman who said, let's just continue with the last 8 years of success. What success was that for them? So, we can argue about who started this. Did the Democrats or the Republicans start it? I tend to think the Republicans started it because the Koch brothers set the agenda, but no Democratic president has stopped it.
That's an important point to remember. And I want to add this part as well. I think we really need to remember the people who voted for Obama twice and in 2016 voted for Donald Trump. This is why when people were telling me that anyone who voted for Donald Trump was racist, I was like, okay, what about Black people that voted for Donald Trump? What about the people who voted for Obama twice and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump? When people look at their own economic conditions and they see that you've had the same president 2 terms in a row, and your economic condition is still not good. And yes, people bring up the Affordable Care Act. Yes, that was something that Obama did. But I know people personally that signed up for the Affordable Care Act and said it was hell of expensive. Making all those promises when he was running. So people are very disappointed and they look at their financial situation and their financial situation did not improve the way that Obama said it would. So if you look at that group of people that were still struggling, that were still suffering, and then they're given the choice of a Hillary Clinton who's corporate, very corporate, and who told them that we're going to take your jobs away. She said that, not me. And the other choice, Donald Trump, and he's telling you to drain the swamp. I don't understand why people in this country were so surprised that those individuals were willing to vote for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. I still remember the shocked looks on people's faces. I can't believe Americans did this. I can't believe they would vote for someone who said this. And I was like, do you live in this country? Not everyone who voted for Donald Trump is racist. So then what's the other reason? People looking at their money situation, the class issue, people realizing things were not getting better for them. But liberal media isn't going to tell you that. Liberal media is going to tell you, this is why it's good to watch independent media. Liberal media is going to tell you that all those people who voted for Trump were racist. And that's the narrative they continue to drive today.
People have been desperate, and people have been confused, and people have not been educated properly, and people have not been served. And they have had a sense of rage and a sense of legitimate rage based on real pain. Why were Europeans, why were people in other advanced democracies getting healthcare? Why were people in other advanced democracies getting educated without these huge college loans and so forth? So we got what any reasonable person would have predicted, and what many people on the real left have predicted would happen. We were told we were alarmists, we were told we were naive, we were told we didn't know what we were talking about. And so as horrifying as the ascension of all this.
Marianne is putting that nicely there when she says we were told we didn't know what we were talking about. We were told we were stupid. I'm sorry, but it's true. We were told we were stupid. We were called dum-dums. She's putting it nicely, but yeah.
Far-right white supremacist ideology is, it should be a surprise to no one who's really been looking at American politics over the last 40 years.
All right, let me pick up on one particular.
People who have been really paying attention. People have been paying attention for the last couple decades.
Thing you just said toward the end. And thank you for being as clear and concise as that was what you just said. What about this resurgence of right wing, extreme right wing, the white supremacy, the disregard for even the formalities of a democratic approach? I'm struck by seeing it not only in the United States. I want to be fair. It seems to be resurging elsewhere. I recently came across Europeans very upset by the behavior of the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany, reviving old fascistic Nazi type stuff that people thought they had put behind them, sort of the way Americans thought they had put white supremacy behind them. What is this? Do you see such a resurgence, and how would you account for that?
These are malevolent, malfunctional viruses of human consciousness. Signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, an amendment to the US Constitution, could end an institution of slavery. It could not end racism. You could stop burning women at the stake. That of itself did not end misogyny. These things go deeper down. So after World War II, for instance, we once again fought the Nazis, beat off the Nazis. But Nazism itself was more a symptom. And I go back to, you must never think you have handled these things. You must be ever vigilant. It's like when someone has a herpes in their bloodstream. What you're hoping is that it will remain asymptomatic, but you're not kidding yourself that it's out of the bloodstream. So,
and I want to add something really quick here in reference to like the Nazis in Germany. Why were people so I don't want to say easily. Well, yeah, I'll say easily. Why did people easily believe that Jewish people were necessarily evil or bad? Why did they believe that? Because Hitler was able to convince people that the reason why the economy sank the way that it did was because of Jewish people. It always leads back to money, you guys. I'm telling you, I've seen this so much. When I lived in the South, people used to blame the Mexicans for the reason why I can't get a job, because all these Mexicans come in here. And I'm like, I was waiting tables at the time. And I'm like, all of them that I've seen are working in the kitchen as dishwashers. Do you want to be a dishwasher? Well, no, I don't want to be a dishwasher, but this is America. I've seen it so much and I've heard it. And in reference to white supremacy in this country, when Professor Wolff mentions, has there been a resurgence? It's been here my whole life. You may see it more out in the open now, but I still remember living in South Carolina and watching Nazis march through downtown Columbia. That was a thing, along with the Klan. This wasn't 1940, 1950, 1960. This was just a couple years ago. So I think it never really went away. They just became more clever about it. Instead of walking around and making it more obvious, they were still present, but they went into professions where they could actually hurt people in a different way. They became cops. They became lawyers. They became doctors. They became lone wolves. They found a more effective way to do it. Now they feel more empowered to come out in the open again, but they've always been here. And if you talk to a lot of people that live down south, and I know some of the Midwest as well, but if you talk to a lot of people that live down south, we'll tell you they never went away. Never. But let's get back in to the video.
We've been very naive in American politics. Several decades ago, no intelligent observer thought we didn't have anti-Semites in this country. No intelligent observer thought we didn't have racists in this country. No intelligent observer thought we didn't have bigots in this country. But we did think we had reached a point, and for a while I think we had reached a point, where neither major political party would give a megaphone to any of those crazies. What happened in the last few years was a terrible toxic brew. Two major elements. Number one, social media, so that anybody can have a platform, and a very malevolent political character who was not above and is not above stoking these forces for his own political purposes. So you put social media together with Donald Trump. Once again, Richard, no one with a more sophisticated psychological understanding of how these things work fails to recognize this was almost inevitable. Once again, you can never consider these things handled for all time. And if you do think these things are handled for all time, you're naive and do not carry with you the kinds of sensibilities that are necessary for leadership in the 21st century.
I just want to add something here. I do want to be clear that this did not start with Donald Trump. And no, I'm not defending Donald Trump, but this didn't start with him. We had racists in the White House before Donald Trump. And I'm going to go to someone that's a little bit closer to us, I guess, generational wise, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the war on drugs, was racist. Ronald Reagan is on tape making racist comments about Black people. Now, there was no social media back then. Maybe he didn't come out and say some things publicly in the way that Donald Trump said it, but Ronald Reagan was just as racist. So it didn't start with him. That's the thing. It did not start with Donald Trump. We had presidents in this country who were slave owners. This is why I'm telling you, it's always been present. If you look at the systems that we have in this country, the education system, the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, they're all one big group under an umbrella of white supremacy. Those systems function to benefit white people first, particularly if you're white and you have money, to benefit white people first and everybody else last. It's always been this way. This is not new. So they're talking about the overt racism. What we need to talk about is the covert racism that is more hidden, that is more subdued, but it's ingrained in a systemic way. That type of racism is the one we really need to pay more attention to, because it affects people on an economic level. It affects people financially, and it affects people to the point where they cannot get out of poverty in this country. Systemic racism is often overlooked. Overt racism is heavily focused on, and we have to switch our way of thinking here. And we have to pay attention to the systemic racial issues that we have in this country that a lot of times white liberals seem to perpetuate. So I have an article coming out about that soon, where I break that down for you. I'm going to explaining to you how they do it, how they're just as racist. So let's go back in.
What should the left in America, the progressive forces, however you define them, those that feel the way pretty much you've been speaking for the last few minutes, what do you want them to do? How do you see a way forward that would blunt the power and influence of the very forces you've been talking about coming from the right, the viruses that are resurging, and chart and achieve a different direction politically? I know that must have been in your mind as part of your running for the Democratic nomination in 2020. So I want to see where your thinking has now taken you along those lines.
I think it's in every conscious person's mind. And each of us has to ask ourselves, what role can we best play? It's a whole systems breakdown, and it demands a whole systems response. People must work on the inside, people must work on the outside. Traditionally, there was a time when it was reasonable to see the Democratic Party as a conduit for the unapologetic, unabashed stance on behalf of democracy and the democratic rights of our people. Economic justice, social justice, political justice, and so forth. Now we understand that that's stymied because the neoliberal corporatist elements are in charge of Democratic Party leadership at this point, and they actively suppress progressive candidates. They act like progressive candidates who are standing for the things you and I are talking about are trying to hijack the party. Actually, they hijacked.
Wait a minute. But that actually was the motto for Justice Democrats. It was supposed to be a hostile takeover. That's actually what was supposed to happen. They were supposed to go in and take over the party.
The party. The real progressives are Eleanor and Franklin. They are the DuPonts and the Morgans. So people recognize this, but
But that was before big money came in. See, that's the difference. That was back when we didn't have big money in electoral politics. Big money changed all of that. Political action committees, super PACs changed all of that.
People are feeling like they're going to work on third-party elements. Now, the United States has a great tradition of significant third-party influence. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Women's Party. Civil rights, obviously, came from the Civil Rights Movement. This was not, desegregation came from Dr. King, the Civil Rights Movement. It did not emerge originally from a political party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. So I believe those things are important, but I also believe maybe because I do remember a time when the Democratic Party stood for these principles. I'm also someone who believes that it's a legitimate decision to work within the Democratic Party and to just keep at it.
Marianne, honey, that time that you remember when the Democratic Party was that way, that time has long passed. Democratic Party hasn't been that way since, well, my whole life. My whole life, the Democratic Party has not been that way. And I'm a millennial. Some of you in the chat are older than me. Let me know. I never experienced this Democratic Party being this way. I always have to look back to history and read about it when they were that way, because I never experienced that. Now, I know some people think that we can convince the Democratic Party to turn back to that. But what I would add is that as long as you have corporate money involved, it is not going to go back to that. So that is one big difference that I do want to explain to people is this. You have to remember, when people talk about FDR, they're talking about a time before political action committees, before big money was in politics. We don't have that now. So the best thing for us to do, if you are going to vote, is to vote third party or vote independent, and also direct action and mutual aid. If you want these things done electorally, we are going to have to put pressure on the politicians. And the only way I see that happening right now is not voting for them and getting out in the streets. If you're not happy with what the Democrats are doing right now in Congress, when it comes this November, don't you vote for them again. Make them earn your vote. What are they doing in your community? What are they doing in your district? How often do you see them? Do they only come around when they're trying to get reelected? Those are all red flags. So why do you need to go and owe them your vote? They have to do something for you. And I've said this before, and we talked about this with the Bank Sisters on here when we were talking about Roe v. Wade. What did we say? Maybe Democrats may need to lose. That's how it is. And I'm not the only one saying this. RBN isn't the only one saying this. I'm telling you, people are tired. People are tired. And some of us are not comfortable enough financially where we can just sit around and wait. I just talked to people over the weekend at a housing project here in Roxbury neighborhood in Boston. You wouldn't believe how the city is just letting these buildings just fall apart. Do you think those individuals living in that housing project can wait and try to push the Democratic Party? They can't. So it is what it is. I do want to remind everybody that the Republican Party was once a third party.
I think that we should be judging other people's decision making on this issue. Some people, it's got to be the labor movement and it's got to be electoral politics. It's got to be both and. It's got to be activism on the outside. It's got to be work on the inside as well. I'm a real both and person on these things, but we just need to keep moving. And I think we are. We're going to get there because the consciousness is rising. You know, that's how the Berlin Wall fell. It's just that the consciousness rose, that at some point it was just inevitable. What actually made it happen was somebody made a wrong phone call or something like that. But what really made it happen was that the energy was so great that that false system had to fall. Neoliberal corporatism is false. It is an amoral system, and an amoral system always leads to immoral consequences. And people are waking up more and more every day.
So I do want to add this part here. Yeah, I hear what she's saying there, but here's the problem though. If you're having this consciousness that's growing, then your consciousness will tell you not to continue to doing the same thing. If you keep voting for them, they're never going to give us anything. They're never going to change. They'll continue to be corporate shills. They'll never change. Never. What has happened? How many times you see this game go in and out? People vote Republican. They didn't like the Republican president. Now we're going to go to Democrat. We didn't like the Democrat politician. Now we're going to go to Republican. Oh, now we're going to try it this way. Now we're going to try it that way. Nothing ever improves because you keep voting for them. You keep giving them your money. You keep donating to them. If you are going to donate, or we're going to donate in the two-party system, I advise you to take that money and donate it to mutual aid group instead, where you can actually see it actually help people. You can actually see your money do some good. Because when you're giving your money to them, your money is not doing any good, not for the people. It's just helping them. You're helping Joe Manchin get richer. Everybody in West Virginia, when you continue to vote for Joe Manchin, you are helping him stay rich. I want you to know that. And he's keeping you poor. Now, the name of this video is called Economic Update. This is Richard Wolff's Democracy at Work channel, and it's Marianne Williamson on U.S. politics. Now, you can catch the entire interview on that channel. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Rockfin, let's do the thing. Johnny says, I like Sabby's redneck impression. Okay. Juliet, the ignorant are used as tools for the real crooks. President Jesus, please define systemic racism. Yes, I was going to do that. I'll show you that in just a second. At Kid, Sabby Sabs, yes, Sabby, it's the systemic advantages that enable and perpetuate racism on behalf of those in power. That's right. And thank you for the super chat, Macharius 39. She is acting like there is no urgency for change. That's right. I'm telling you, people can't afford to wait. Just give that money to mutual aid. Just help people in your community, like people that need it. People that need it. Systemic racism. Let's go ahead and share that because I do want to show this to you guys. Again, I don't know everyone's age group in the chat and stuff. And because I was an educator, sometimes I just say things and I got to realize I should explain what some of these terms mean. Here we go. Systemic racism. Discrimination or unequal treatment on the basis of membership in a particular ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized, arising from systems, structures, or expectations that have become established within society or an institution. This is actually even more dangerous than overt racism, because when you put these systems in place, this is something that is very difficult for people to get out of. Not excusing any type of racism, but it's very hard to get out of this type of racism. The education system for me, as someone who's an educator, I can tell you it's very loud and alive in education. You see the difference. You see the disparities when you go to a school in the Black neighborhood and you go to a school in a poor Black neighborhood. You see the difference when you go to those schools versus when you go to a school in a white suburb here in Massachusetts. And that's all across the country, by the way. You see the disparities. You see it with the criminal justice system. Two people commit the same crime, no priors, one white, one Black. Why does the Black person get more time? Like I said, it's deeply rooted, and that is more difficult to get out of.